Welcome, seeker.
In the heart of ancient Athens, beneath the marble columns and the sun's golden fire, there walked a man who claimed to know nothing, and yet, through his ignorance, he revealed truths that have outlived empires. They called him Socrates, a barefoot mystic cloaked in reason. A man condemned by his own city for corrupting the youth, yet remembered as the one who awakened humanity's conscience. But who was he really? A philosopher? A prophet of reason? Or something far older? An embodiment of a timeless wisdom that whispers through the ages. Know thyself. To the untrained eye, Socrates was a peculiar man. He left no written word, no grand treatise, no monument in his name. What we know of him survives through the memories of others: Plato, Xenophon, Aristophanes, each painting him differently: sage, clown, or divine fool. And yet, through the fragments of these recollections, a strange paradox emerges. For here was a man who questioned everything, yet never taught in the usual sense, who dismantled beliefs like a sculptor carving marble, revealing not new ideas, but the naked soul of truth hidden beneath illusion. To understand Socrates is to step into the labyrinth of the human mind, a labyrinth built not of walls, but of words, arguments, and self-deception. He was not simply a thinker. He was an alchemist of the spirit, turning ignorance into wisdom and certainty into ashes. He asked no one to believe him, only to look within, to listen, to awaken. In an age when gods ruled every corner of thought, Socrates became a mirror, forcing men to confront themselves. But behind this humble seeker stood a revolution. He lived in a time of shifting powers, when Athens glittered with the pride of democracy, yet rotted from within. The sophists sold wisdom for gold. Politicians sold truth for votes. And then came Socrates, unbending, incorruptible, armed with nothing but his words and an unyielding faith in the examined life. He claimed that true knowledge was not in the stars, not in temples or scrolls, but in the depths of the soul. He sought the divine not through ritual or sacrifice, but through reason, virtue, and relentless self-inquiry. To his enemies, he was dangerous. To his students, he was divine. And yet there is another layer to this story. Was Socrates merely a man? Or was he, as some ancient mystics believed, a vessel for the daemonian, the inner voice, the whisper of divine reason that lives within every human being? His life, his death, and his method of inquiry were not random. They were symbols, expressions of an ancient teaching about awakening consciousness through the destruction of illusion. When Socrates drank the hemlock, it was not merely the death of a philosopher. It was the sacrifice of one who dared to remind mankind that truth cannot be taught, only remembered. In this exploration, we will journey beyond the historical veil to uncover the true essence of Socratic wisdom, his mysterious method, his hidden spiritual insight, and the timeless message encoded in his death. We will see how his questions cut through the illusions of his age and how they still echo within ours. And we will discover why, perhaps, the oracle at Delphi proclaimed him the wisest man alive, not because he knew everything, but because he alone understood the depth of what he did not know. This is not merely a story of an ancient philosopher. It is a mirror for the soul, a guide for those who seek to awaken the light of reason, to pierce through illusion, and to live a life of inner truth. So, let us step into ancient Athens, where the wind carries the voices of the past, and the stones remember the footsteps of the man who questioned everything, so that we might one day know ourselves. To truly understand Socrates, we must travel back to a world on the edge of transformation. The 5th century BCE was the golden age of Athens, a city radiant with art, architecture, and democracy, yet shadowed by war, ambition, and moral decay. The Parthenon had just been built, gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, and poets like Sophocles and Euripides stirred the hearts of men. But beneath this brilliance, Athens was fractured, its politics poisoned by pride, its people seduced by the rhetoric of those who spoke not for truth, but for persuasion. It was here, amidst this turbulence, that Socrates emerged, an enigma walking barefoot through the marketplace, engaging anyone who would listen in conversations that began simply, but ended in revelation or discomfort. The Athenian youth adored him. They followed him not because he offered answers, but because he destroyed illusions. He would stop politicians, poets, craftsmen, and generals, and through gentle yet relentless questioning, he would strip away their pretenses until only their ignorance remained. He called this process the elenchus, the art of refutation. To his students, it was liberation. To his accusers, it was chaos. In a city proud of its intellect, Socrates became a mirror that revealed how little people actually understood. And for many, that mirror was unbearable. To grasp the depth of his role, we must see him not just as a man of reason, but as part of a much older lineage of seekers. The same current of inner knowledge that flowed through the mysteries of Egypt, the Orphic cults of Greece, and the Delphic traditions of Apollo. The Delphic oracle, the voice of divine wisdom, once proclaimed, "There is no one wiser than Socrates," to which Socrates responded with irony, "I know that I know nothing." But beneath that humility was a profound metaphysical insight. For to know nothing is not ignorance, it is awareness of limitation, the starting point of true wisdom. It echoes the Hermetic axiom, "He who knows himself knows the all." This self-knowledge, Socrates taught, is not mere introspection, it is initiation. In the ancient world, knowledge was not information. It was transformation. To know was to become one with truth, to align the microcosm of the self with the macrocosm of the cosmos. Socrates did not reject the gods, he redefined them. He spoke often of his daemonion, an inner voice, a divine whisper that guided him when he strayed from truth. To some, this was madness. To others, it was proof that he stood at the threshold between man and the divine. Through this concept, he bridged the material and spiritual realms. He replaced superstition with inner awareness, ritual with reason, and faith with self-inquiry. This was not philosophy, as we know it today. It was spiritual rebellion. While the sophists charged money to teach persuasion, Socrates charged nothing to teach virtue. He believed that wisdom could not be sold because it already existed within each soul, buried, forgotten, waiting to be remembered. To awaken that inner wisdom, he employed what he called myeutic, the art of midwifery. Just as a midwife helps birth a child, Socrates helped others give birth to truth from within themselves. He did not fill minds, he awakened them. It was this radical idea that truth resides in every human being that threatened the establishment most. For if every person carried divine reason within, then no priest, politician, or teacher could claim to own it. This was not merely a challenge to intellectual authority, it was a challenge to power itself. To his followers Plato, Alcibiades, Xenophon, Socrates was more than a teacher. He was a living mystery. He spoke of the soul as immortal, and of philosophy as preparation for death, not in despair, but in purification. In this, we see echoes of the Orphic and Pythagorean initiations paths that taught the soul's liberation from the body through knowledge and virtue. Socrates absorbed these mystical influences, but refined them into a discipline of logic, ethics, and self-mastery. He was both mystic and rationalist, seer and skeptic, standing at the crossroads of the visible and the invisible. But Athens, for all its brilliance, was not ready for such paradox. The city that had given birth to democracy would soon condemn its wisest son. To the politicians, his questioning undermined authority. To the poets, his skepticism insulted the gods. And to the masses, he made them doubt what they thought they knew. In 399 BCE, they charged him with impiety and corrupting the youth. But the truth is far deeper. He was executed not for blasphemy, but for awakening a generation that had learned to question power. His trial and death were the final act of an ancient ritual, the martyrdom of wisdom at the hands of ignorance. And yet, through his sacrifice, his ideas did not die, they transcended. Through Plato, they became the foundation of Western thought, bridging mysticism and reason, soul and science, being and becoming. To see Socrates clearly, we must strip away the marble idol and behold the man as he was, a seeker of divine truth hidden in human dialogue. He was a mystic in disguise, teaching that the path to enlightenment begins not in temples or texts, but in the quiet courage to ask and to listen. When we speak of Socrates, we often imagine the philosopher in dialogue, a man surrounded by students, questioning, refuting, smiling as he exposes contradictions. But this image, though iconic, only scratches the surface of his true mission. Socrates did not set out to teach philosophy. He set out to awaken consciousness. His method, the Socratic Dialogue, was not merely intellectual. It was spiritual surgery. Each question was a blade cutting away illusion. Each pause an invitation for the soul to breathe. He believed that wisdom is not something one acquires, but something one remembers. For beneath layers of belief and conditioning, truth already lives within us, waiting to be recalled. This idea, known as anamnesis, would later become central to Plato's philosophy, but its roots lie in Socrates' belief that the soul carries eternal knowledge. To understand his method, imagine a conversation in the Athenian agora. Socrates approaches a statesman who claims to know what justice is. Through gentle but relentless questioning, Socrates reveals that the man's definition contradicts itself. What began as certainty dissolves into confusion. But this confusion was not failure, it was purification. For only when the false is destroyed can the true emerge. This process is the very essence of transformation. Just as alchemists burned away impurities to find gold, Socrates burned away illusions to uncover wisdom. It is no coincidence that Hermetic and later mystical traditions saw in Socrates a hidden adept one who practiced the inner alchemy of the mind. For Socrates, knowledge and virtue were inseparable. To know the good was to be good. Ignorance, therefore, was the root of all evil. No one, he said, does wrong knowingly. They do so because they do not truly understand what is right. This idea was revolutionary. It placed moral failure not in sin, but in unawareness, and it made self-knowledge the highest form of morality. Thus, know thyself, the ancient Delphic command, became the beating heart of his philosophy. But what does it mean to know oneself? It is not about personality, preference, or ego. It is to perceive the eternal essence that animates all beings. To look inward and find, not an isolated self, but a reflection of the divine order that shapes the cosmos. This is why Socrates often spoke of his daemonion, that mysterious inner voice which warned him, not of what to do, but what not to do. It was not emotion or impulse, but intuition, the whisper of the soul. To follow this voice was to live in harmony with truth. To ignore it was to betray one's essence. Through this mystical yet rational framework, Socrates bridged two worlds, the world of the philosophers and the world of the initiates. He used reason as a sacred tool, not to dissect the divine, but to approach it through clarity and coherence. Where the priests used ritual to invoke gods, Socrates used dialogue to invoke understanding. Where the oracles spoke in riddles, he asked questions that revealed the riddles within men's hearts. And in this way, philosophy itself became a sacred active ritual of awakening. Yet, his teachings were never meant to be comfortable. Socrates was a provocateur of the spirit. He forced others to confront their ignorance, their contradictions, their fragile sense of certainty. In doing so, he exposed the human tendency to mistake opinion for truth, belief for knowledge, and appearance for essence. He taught that most people live in a kind of dream, awaking sleep in which they mistake shadows for reality. This idea would later evolve into Plato's allegory of the cave, but the seed of it was Socratic, the belief that the philosopher's task is to awaken the sleeper to the blinding light of truth. And yet, Socrates was no cynic. He did not condemn humanity for its ignorance. He saw in every person the potential for awakening, the spark of divine reason, logos, that connects all minds to the cosmic order. To converse with Socrates was to enter into an initiation. He was not simply debating ideas. He was guiding souls toward remembrance. Each dialogue was a mirror held up to the soul, and for those who dared to look deeply, that mirror became a doorway. But perhaps the most radical element of his philosophy was his insistence that wisdom could never be possessed. He claimed to be ignorant precisely because wisdom is not an object, it is a state. It cannot be stored in scrolls or claimed by titles. It must be lived, breathed, and rediscovered moment by moment. This humility was not weakness, it was mastery. For in acknowledging the limits of knowledge, Socrates transcended them. He stood in the mystery, unafraid. He showed that the highest form of wisdom is to stand before the infinite and say, "I do not know, but I am willing to learn." And this is where his true genius lies. He turned philosophy from a set of doctrines into a living practice, a path of purification through questioning. His method did not give answers. It awakened consciousness. It is this awakening, this sacred discomfort, that lies at the heart of all spiritual traditions. The Buddha called it right view. The Hermetists called it gnosis. Socrates called it simply virtue. As we delve deeper, we begin to see that Socrates' dialogues were not merely conversations about ethics or logic. They were initiatory experiences, veiled in the language of reason, but pointing toward the realization of the eternal self. For him, philosophy was not about abstract theories. It was the art of dying before death, the preparation of the soul to see reality as it is. And perhaps this is why his life and death became a symbol of the soul's eternal quest, a reminder that truth cannot be silenced, and that wisdom, once born into the world, never truly dies. By the time Socrates was an old man, his mission had already begun to unsettle the foundations of Athenian society. He had no wealth, no writings, and no official title, yet his influence was greater than that of kings and generals. Through nothing but dialogue, he had become a mirror in which Athens saw its own corruption, confusion, and fear. And when a mirror reveals too much truth, the world often seeks to shatter it. The charge against him was simple on paper, corrupting the youth and impiety, questioning the gods of the city. But in reality, Socrates' crime was far more dangerous. He taught people to think for themselves. He awakened in them the divine spark of reason that no tyrant, no tradition could control. And for that, he had to be silenced. Yet even as he faced trial, Socrates did not waver. He spoke not with defiance, but serenity, as if already beyond the grasp of fear. He told his judges, "The unexamined life is not worth living." To live without reflection, without seeking truth, was to exist, but not to be alive. When we read his dialogues through a mystical lens, we see that his trial was not a political event, but an initiation ritual, the culmination of his spiritual path. In accepting death, Socrates transcended the final illusion. He drank the hemlock calmly, speaking to his friends of the immortality of the soul. For him, death was not annihilation, it was liberation. He had spent his life purifying the mind, removing falsehoods one by one, until only truth remained. And when truth alone is left, death has no power. This is why Plato would later say that philosophy itself is a preparation for death, not a morbid fixation, but a discipline of release away to free the soul from attachment to what is transient. In this sense, Socrates was not only a philosopher, he was a mystic. He practiced the art of dying daily, dying to false beliefs, to pride, to the illusions of certainty. Each question, each doubt was a small death, a letting go of something untrue. Yet his approach was not denial of the world, but an awakening within it. He saw divinity not in temples or sacrifices, but in the structure of reason itself, the harmony that pervades the cosmos. Just as Pythagoras heard music in the movement of the stars, Socrates heard the voice of the divine in the quiet order of the mind. He once said that to do wrong harms not the body, but the soul, and the soul is the most sacred part of man. Therefore, to act unjustly, even in revenge, was to wound one's own being. This is not mere morality, it is metaphysics. It reveals that the soul is not a passive witness to truth, is truth, obscured by ignorance, waiting to be rediscovered through wisdom. The deeper we explore, the clearer it becomes that Socrates' philosophy was not confined to ethics or debate. It was a sacred process of transformation and inner alchemy of mind and soul. He did not preach belief, he practiced awakening. He showed that the divine is not out there, but within the light of awareness itself. To live virtuously, for him, was not to follow commandments, but to align oneself with the divine order, to act as the universe acts, with harmony, intelligence, and compassion. There is something profoundly mystical in how Socrates described his daemonion, his guiding spirit. It did not instruct him on what to pursue, but rather warned him against missteps. It was a force of restraint, a whisper reminding him of the subtle balance between will and wisdom. This notion echoes in Hermetic and Gnostic traditions, that true knowledge does not come through assertion, but through listening. The divine speaks not in thunder, but in silence. To hear it, one must cultivate stillness within, and in that stillness, Socrates found his freedom. Perhaps this is why his dialogues always end with uncertainty. They never provide final answers, only deeper questions. This, too, is initiation. For truth cannot be given. It must be discovered within. Socrates' method forces the listener to look inward, to confront their ignorance, and in doing so, to awaken to a greater knowing that lies beyond words. He never claimed to have the truth. He embodied the search for it. And this search is eternal. It is this paradox to know by admitting not knowing that defines the Socratic path. It mirrors the mystical principle found across ages, that one must empty the self to be filled by the divine. Just as a vessel must be hollow to hold light, the mind must be humble to receive truth. This humility was Socrates' greatest strength, the very thing his accusers could not comprehend. They sought certainty, he sought clarity. They worshipped opinion, he revered understanding. They clung to form, he lived by essence. And so, his death was not a defeat, but a transfiguration. In choosing truth over safety, Socrates became the prototype of the awakened soul, one who follows the inner voice, even when it leads beyond the boundaries of the world. He taught that the real philosopher must not fear death, for death is only the shedding of illusion. What remains pure consciousness, the soul in its eternal nature, is the true self that neither perishes nor changes. Through this understanding, Socrates stands as one of humanity's great initiates, not a man of abstract theories, but a living embodiment of the quest for divine wisdom. His teachings, hidden beneath the language of reason, were always pointing to one simple truth, that to know oneself is to know the universe. And this, perhaps, is the secret he carried to his final breath, the realization that wisdom is not about mastering knowledge, but about remembering what the soul has always known. If you wish to keep walking deeper into these mysteries, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and keep walking together through the doorways of wisdom our ancestors left behind. Socrates was not a man of dogmas. He was a midwife of souls. His method was not meant to fill you with knowledge, but to awaken the part of you that already knows. To truly walk in his footsteps is not to memorize his words, but to practice his way of being. So how can we live as Socrates lived, here, now, in the modern world? 1. The practice of inner dialogue. Socrates taught that wisdom begins in dialogue, but not only with others. The truest conversation is the one you have with yourself. Set aside time each day to question your inner voice. Ask yourself, as Socrates would ask his students, why do I believe this? Where did this thought come from? Is this truly mine or inherited? This inner questioning is an act of purification. It burns away borrowed opinions and inherited illusions, leaving behind what is genuine and alive in you. It is not about finding answers. It is about deepening the quality of your awareness. As you question, you sharpen your soul, just as iron sharpens iron. 2. The art of not knowing. Socrates' wisdom began in an admission. I know that I know nothing. In a world obsessed with certainty, this phrase is revolutionary. Try for one day to suspend your urge to be right. In every conversation, ask, what if I am mistaken? What can I learn from this moment? This isn't weakness, it's spiritual strength. The one who is willing to not know becomes the one who truly sees. Because truth is not a possession, it is a movement, a wind that only touches the open mind. 3. The Socratic pause. Before reacting, pause. This was perhaps the secret of Socratic mastery. When provoked, he did not lash out. When questioned, he did not rush to respond. He waited, observing not just the other, but his own impulses. Try this. When emotion rises, breathe. Step back from the storm of your thoughts and ask, what is moving within me right now? Anger? Pride? Fear? Name it. Watch it. In that moment, you become larger than it. This simple practice, the pause, is the foundation of self-mastery. It transforms reaction into reflection, and reflection into wisdom. 4. Living in alignment with the inner demon. Socrates often spoke of his demon, an inner voice that guided him, a whisper of divine intuition. He said it never told him what to do, only what not to do. Each of us has such a voice. It speaks in quiet sensations, a tightening of the chest, a sudden stillness, an unexplainable sense of knowing. To live Socratically is to listen to that voice, to trust that inner signal more than the noise of the world. Because when the mind quiets, the demon speaks. To cultivate this, practice silence. Turn off the world for a while. Walk without music, sit without distraction, and observe the subtle guidance that arises from within. 5. The courage to die daily. Socrates said philosophy is a preparation for death. But he didn't mean physical death. He meant the death of falsehood, of ego, of attachment. To die daily is to release something you cling to, a belief, an identity, a fear. It's the art of letting go, not to lose yourself, but to find what remains when all illusions fall away. Try this reflection each night. What part of me died today? In this quiet dying, something extraordinary happens. You begin to live fully. For only the one who no longer fears loss can experience true freedom. 6. The philosophy of service. Socrates lived for the awakening of others. He saw every encounter as sacred, a chance to midwife another soul toward light. You can do the same. When speaking to someone lost in confusion, listen deeply. Ask the kind of questions that draw forth clarity, not dominance. Seek understanding, not victory. To live Socratically is to be a flame, not one that consumes, but one that illuminates. These are not intellectual exercises. They are transformations of consciousness. Each question, each pause, each act of inner listening reshapes you into the kind of being Socrates believed every human could become. One who lives in truth, guided not by fear or opinion, but by the whisper of the divine within. And so, as the outer world grows louder and more divided, remember the simple power of the inner question. What is truth, and am I living it? Because perhaps, just perhaps, the true Socratic life is not found in ancient Athens, but in every moment you dare to know yourself. In the dim corridors of time, Socrates remains more than a man. He is a mirror held before the soul of humanity. Neither prophet nor priest, neither skeptic nor saint. He was something rarer, a being fully awake. He walked through Athens barefoot, clothed in simplicity, armed with nothing but questions. Yet those questions shook the foundations of empires and belief systems. For his true weapon was not argument, but clarity. He taught that wisdom is not the accumulation of ideas, but the stripping away of illusion. That virtue is not taught through words, but discovered through inner alignment. And that death itself, that great specter, is no enemy, but merely the veil between ignorance and understanding. In his calm acceptance of the hemlock, Socrates revealed a truth that few have dared to embody, that the philosopher's true homeland is not the world of appearances, but the realm of the eternal. He did not die as a victim of injustice. He died as a servant of truth. His death was a ceremony, his silence a teaching, and his final words a reminder that purification is the price of awakening. To understand Socrates is to feel the echo of the Delphic commandment, know thyself. It sounds simple, but it is the most dangerous path a human can walk. Because to truly know yourself is to dismantle the false, to face the shadow, to meet the divine spark hidden within the chaos of your own being. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you question your beliefs instead of defending them, every time you choose truth over comfort, you continue the Socratic lineage. You become part of the quiet rebellion of souls who seek not belief, but understanding. Socrates' life was not just an ancient story, it was an initiation. A reminder that the path to wisdom does not lie in temples or books, but within the heart that dares to inquire. For he showed that the greatest teacher is not outside you, but within. That philosophy is not a theory to be studied, but a flame to be lived. And so, if his spirit still walks among us, it does not dwell in marble statues or dusty scrolls. It walks wherever someone stops and asks, "What is truth?" It lives in every mind that chooses to question rather than conform, and in every soul that, like Socrates, is willing to die for the truth and be reborn in wisdom. The legacy of Socrates is not just philosophy, it is transformation. It is awakening. It is the eternal reminder that the greatest revolution is inner. So now, I turn the question to you. What does it truly mean to know yourself? Perhaps that is where your own philosophical journey begins. If you found meaning in this exploration, if the wisdom of Socrates stirred something within you, then consider subscribing to Labyrinth of the Veiled, where we continue to uncover the forgotten truths that shape consciousness and reality itself. Join the conversation below. Share your reflections, your questions, your own search for wisdom. For as Socrates taught, it is through dialogue that the soul awakens.